If ever you thought you were having a bad year, get a load of Albon's situation. The Thai racer was pumped for the Italian Grand Prix, but missed it all thanks to an emergency surgery. But Albon says he's not done yet. He bounced back in the Singapore Grand Prix and then in Japan. In today's video, we'll tell you all about how Albon is not underestimating the challenge of returning to action after his surgery, and more. Starting with Albon's unfortunate appendicitis surgery. The Thai-British racer was super hyped about the Italian Grand Prix he was set to participate in soon. Being an experienced and skilled driver, Albon was confident that he was acing it this time, but things didn't go according to plan. The Williams driver was at Italian Grand Prix practice at Monza when he fell seriously ill and needed urgent surgery. He unfortunately had to miss the Italian Grand Prix. Dutch driver Nyck de Vries filled in for him for the remainder of the race weekend. In fact, things had gotten so bad that Albon was admitted to an intensive care unit after his surgery. Williams later confirmed that the driver had experienced respiratory failure. But the champ that he is, Albon made a pretty quick recovery and got in touch with his fans too. The following week, he returned to the UK and started his journey to complete recovery and be healthy enough to see the Singapore Grand Prix that would take place 2.5 weeks later. A tweet from F1 had confirmed this, saying, "Alex Albon will be back behind the wheel of his Williams." Albon claimed he had done everything possible to get ready to compete in this weekend's Singapore Grand Prix. He said, "The goal is to be ready by Singapore, which is going to be tough." Let's look at what he has to say about the challenges. As they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Albon has stuck to that motto throughout his career. He said it's one of the most challenging races drivers go to, so not an easy one. But let's aim high and see what happens. Albon has also been very grateful to everyone and recently said, "I'd just like to thank everyone for all their messages and support over the Italian Grand Prix weekend." The 26-year-old said he'd been eager to take control of his Williams FW44 once more, but he knew that the conditions at the Singapore circuit and the heat were definitely going to be a whole challenge in itself, and boy was he right. He admitted that he had no illusions about how difficult it would be to take the wheel again at one of the championship's most physically demanding races. "My preparation for Singapore has been a little different than normal." He claimed he was super excited to be there and see the fans who came out because it was a great street circuit and the closest race to his home in Thailand. Now, this isn't the first time Albon is racing in Singapore. He's been there, done that, and did a pretty good job with it, actually. But the current Singapore Grand Prix has been a massive disappointment for the Thai-British driver. Moving on to the much-awaited race. The Singapore Grand Prix recently marked Alex Albon's return to Formula One for the Williams team after his appendicitis recovery. While it surely is a feat in itself, Albon's race at the Grand Prix ended up being rather disappointing. He started the race in 18th place, but after a poor opening lap in which he spun into a barrier at turn 7, he fell to the back of the pack. Although he was able to keep the car running and return to the pit lane after his lap 7 collision with a barrier at turn 8, it was decided that the FW44 had sustained too much damage to continue. Albon acknowledged following the race that Williams lacked the pace to compete for points, and he was regretting his mistake. He said that as soon as he got out of the car, he took a quick look at it. Nothing strange happened. He got surprised and didn't brake later or do anything else. What's more, he thinks Williams has a problem. Albon recalled a similar incident from the Monaco Grand Prix where he ran straight on at turn 1 in wet conditions and said he thinks Williams may have a problem they need to solve when asked whether his spin on the first lap and his crash were caused by a similar issue. According to Williams head of vehicle performance Dave Robson, the FW44's aerodynamics were harmed by Albon's spin on the first lap. Albon says getting the brakes in the right window while wet is quite tricky, but he isn't pinning it entirely on the wet course either. He claims that he made a mistake, but it was a difficult one, calling it super frustrating, even though he says Williams didn't really have the pace that weekend. But he's not going down and said that he'd fight back in Japan. But Japan turned out to be far worse, guys. Let's look at the conditions in Japan. Albon is clearly having a terrible time this year, with major disappointments lined up, one after the other. Just halfway through the first lap of the race, his Williams car decided to break down thanks to all the chaos caused by the rain and poor visibility visibility. Albon said the racing conditions were the worst he had ever experienced in his entire career. I couldn't see more than 10 meters around me. He said he was surprised that they even started in those conditions. He believes everyone was eager for the race to begin, but they shouldn't have started the race. He said it was sort of like a pinball going from track edge to track edge, adding that he was trying to keep the car on the track and looking for a sign, a fence, or a braking marker to understand where he was on the circuit. Wow, this must have been intense. And thanks to those onboard cameras, we can all see how challenging it must have been. In fact, a lot of things went wrong during the race at Suzuka. Let's look at what went down. The problem of recovery vehicles reared its head at Suzuka. The Japanese Grand Prix was stopped due to numerous accidents on the opening lap, with the drivers having little to no visibility due to the weather. Carlos Sainz lost control of his vehicle as he rounded the slight right-hand turn into Spoon Curve. This led him to crash into the barrier and scatter advertising boarding across the track. Pierre Gasly had the bad luck of collecting the shattered pieces with his front wing, but he soon became upset after the race was stopped when he drove past a recovery vehicle on the side of the road. It was collecting Sainz's damaged Ferrari before the cars had returned to the pit lane. Considering the tragic accident that happened to Jules Bianchi in similar circumstances in 2014, Gasly and others have since spoken out, objecting to the recovery tractor being on the track at that time. Albon agreed and added that Senior Grand Prix Drivers Association member and four-time world champion Vettel had recently brought this to the FIA's attention too. We're just glad no one got hurt, and we think maybe the FIA should keep driver safety at the forefront instead of its cars. First, you make them race in bad weather. Then, you send down recovery cranes in the middle. Truly outrageous. Anyway, let's have a look at some other related news now. First, Sergio Perez suggests that Formula One Latin drivers face more criticism. Perez had experienced a slump in performance. It persisted ever since he agreed to a new Red Bull contract following the Monaco Grand Prix. That streak ended with a commanding victory at the Singapore Grand Prix, arguably the best of his 4 championship-winning drives in Formula One. But after the race, Perez claimed that his poor performance was exaggerated by the media because he's Mexican. He claims that Latin drivers typically receive harsher treatment from the media, but he uses this as motivation rather than as a source of frustration. Next up, Red Bull's Max Verstappen wins the second Formula One title. Max Verstappen of Red Bull won his second Formula One World Championship. This came amid chaos after Charles Leclerc, a Ferrari opponent, was given a 5-second post-race penalty at the Japanese Grand Prix. Leclerc dropped from second to third behind Red Bull's Sergio Perez after cutting the final chicane while defending against the Mexican on the final lap, giving the victory to the Dutch driver at Suzuka. Finally, Lewis Hamilton wants F1 to be tougher on the budget cap. Lewis has insisted that if any teams are found to have violated the rules governing Formula One's budget cap, the FIA must take decisive action. The 7-time champion stated that the integrity of the sport was at stake and brought up how Red Bull appeared to be spending a lot of money on enhancing their car last season. Allegedly, there have been claims that Red Bull had gone over the £114 million budget cap set for 2021, surfaced at the Singapore Grand Prix. And that's a wrap for this video. What do you think about Albon's return to the Singapore Grand Prix? Comment below and let us know. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more. See you on the next one.